Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a VR to Simon over at the Hermit's Cave, and it's a hashtag that he created, hashtag my workhorse decks. So before I get started, I do want to, I guess, sort of share my thoughts about having multiple decks that fit a certain criteria. I do think that any reader can only have one deck and use that deck for a variety of sorts of readings and still be a fantastic reader. I do also find that having different decks in your library can add nuances through changes in art or titles, things like that. So I guess my point is there is no right or wrong way to do it. And I do think that really 2 or 3 decks could fill all 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 7 of these categories. Well, I guess the first 5 are sort of the variety of kinds of readings, and the last 2 in this hashtag are sort of decks that are new and decks that you are reaching for again. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just dive right in. The first prompt is a deck for shadow work. And again, there are a multitude of decks that do sort of fit this category, but I do find that there are decks that I really reach for solely for shadow work. And that is, it's actually a tarot and an oracle. That is the Terra Volatile and the Reclaim Oracle. Both of these decks just really get to the heart of any emotion that might be lurking underneath that I may not want to confront. And they just work very well for shadow work, in my experience. So, put all this together. So the Reclaim Oracle is just fantastic for shadow work. The sort of non-binary, I guess, like there's no true gender, no distinct characteristics. All the characters in this deck sort of have the same body, same shape, and I find that that really allows for anyone to be able to connect to the words. So it's less about the character and more about the environment and the keyword in this deck. So it's sort of scraping away the layers that we would use to identify with the character in this deck, such as like skin tone, hair color, eye color, body type, things like that. And it just really allows us to get to the root emotion that is depicted in the card. And just the words that were chosen and the drawings for each one are fantastic. And the guidebook is literal poetry. In my opinion, it's it's pretty much poetry written by the creator, and it doesn't hold back. It gets to the root of the emotion, it gets to the root of what the card is telling you. But not in a very aggressive way. It's a gentle nudge into the emotion that you might be not dealing with. And this deck is definitely one that when we first started working together, it called me out to the point where I thought that something was wrong, like with the deck itself, which there absolutely is not, because I was pulling all the negative emotion cards. And it got to the point where I separated the deck into like the positive and negative emotions, and sure enough, it's pretty 50-50. It's pretty even. I was just not dealing with the emotions that I had to. And Terra Volatile it's an RWS clone, but it does have just sort of a dark and sort of gritty added layer to it, where it just connects to emotions that I'm not dealing with. And that sort of deep, dark, shadowy, gritty imagery, it does sort of change the meaning, even though it's a RWS clone. Like I was saying earlier, the nuances in the art change the meaning for me in this deck. And I've actually surprisingly not used these two decks together. I tend to, if I'm using one, I'll use like a more fluffy, I guess, Terra deck, and if I'm using Terra Volatile, I will use a lighter Oracle deck, just because that's that way it's not too much too fast, I guess. Not diving too deep into shadow. But both of these decks do work really well for shadow work for me. And it's something that I'm still sort of, I have to be in the right mindset to do shadow work, and I do think that I should be doing it more. So I think this season of change is going to allow, I guess, more time for getting into shadow work. I'm going through a period of change in my life, and with change comes stress, and with stress comes suppressed emotions. So time to do my shadow work, I guess. But both of these are great decks, and now that I'm looking at them together, I do want to see how they do pair together, to see how they read together, if it is actually too dark, or if it is a lovely pairing. So that is the Reclaim Oracle and Terra Volatile. Okay, the next prompt for my Workhorse decks is a deck for inner child work. And this was pretty much a no-brainer for me. Again, there are a lot of decks in my library that I can use for this, but the one deck that I do use more often for inner child work than other sorts of readings is the Northern Animal Tarot. Now this deck is still new to me. I got it in, I guess it's not that new, I got it in February and it's April. Oh my gosh, time flies. But this is the second edition, so the one that was just successfully funded on Kickstarter. I do leave the sort of oracle cards separate. Haven't reached for them a ton, but I keep them separated in the bag by the guidebook. And this deck, I did get with the sole intention of using for inner child work for myself and for my loved ones, my family and friends, and especially because like a lot of the people in my life that are around my age, our childhood was filled with these sort of storybook anthropomorphized animal characters, whether it was various, you know, Disney movies, other like PBS shows, other sorts of movies and shows, and book characters. We were just, there was a lot of this sort of characterization of animals in our childhood, and I think that's just common in children's stories in general. So something about these anthropomorphized animals just takes me back to that time where I was surrounded by this in the books that I read, in the movies and shows that I chose to watch. And so it really does allow me to go back to that time. And it's a gentle deck, you know, it allows me to revert back to that inner child and feel safe. And I believe I talked about this in my flip through video of this deck when I first got it, that by not having human characters in the cards, it does create a level or a layer of distance and a layer of safety. Because as a child, grown-ups or bullies, like other humans, can just make us feel really bad. And so the animal characters felt safe because they were not too similar to the people that made us feel bad as a child. And that was sort of something that I came to realize as I was flipping through the deck, that it just creates a level of safety. So I do use this for inner child work. It is an RWS clone, and I don't have too many of those in my library anymore. I'm sort of going through, again, a time of change, also in my tarot practice, where I'm culling my collection down to what really matters most to me. And I do think that this deck does offer enough nuance with its animal characters to stay in my library. So while it is an RWS clone, I think the animal characters are different enough to warrant this deck to stay. And there's just something so cozy and inviting about it. And I just feel safe and secure when I look through these images. And I think that I never did own the first edition, but I think the second edition was definitely improved on via the color changes. The cardstock is different, so this is not a linen cardstock. I don't know if they're about the same size. I know the backs changed, the cardstock is different, the colors were brighter, some cards were slightly changed. So unfortunately I was not ever able to do like a side-by-side comparison. I do believe my friend Christa over at Adventures in Metaphysics has a comparison of those two. So if I remember, I'll try to leave a link to her video down in the description. But I really do love this deck. When I first got it, I was using it a lot for my daily readings, and I do definitely think, again, it serves a wide variety of purpose. And can do a wide variety of readings. But when I really want to harness my inner child and sort of do some inner child work, I do tend to reach for this deck over pretty much any other that I have in my library, more often than not. So that is the Northern Animal Tarot, 2nd edition. Okay, the third prompt was a deck you use for path working, which is sort of using the art to really dive into an image. And I really don't do that too often. I have not tried path working. So for this prompt, I'm actually going to do a similar revision as what my friend Jess over at Empress and Basil did when she did this video. And that is a deck you use for study. And mine currently is my Thoth deck. So this deck is one that I was scared of for a very long time. When I originally got it, I purchased it because I thought, oh, any tarot reader worth their salt is going to also read with Thoth, which is incorrect. You can read with any sort of style of deck you want, whether it be RWS, Marseille, Thoth, pip decks, playing cards, whichever. All forms of divination are valid. And I did purchase this at a time where I was feeling a lot of, I guess, pressure to be a certain kind of tarot reader, and I wasn't ready for it. So when I did get this deck, I learned just how much there is to this deck, meaning astrology, color theory, tarot, sacred geometry, like there's Kabbalah, there's so many different layers in this deck that when I did first get it, I was very intimidated, and I put it away for months. I didn't read with it at all, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to. And I believe it was Sylvain's video, where one day he made a video and he was like, just read with it. And that really clicked something within me, and I just started reading with it. And I take it a layer at a time. So if I want astrology, I go for this deck. If I want color theory, sacred geometry, like depending on what I want that day, I can go to this deck. It is very well-rounded, very multi-purpose. Jess calls it the Swiss Army knife of tarot, and I definitely agree with her on that. It can suit a wide variety of purpose. And because there are so many layers to it, I'm still at a point where I'm studying it. And so I'm taking it a little bit at a time. I'm currently listening to Fortune's Wheelhouse podcast, where they sort of compare the Thoth with the RWS, and just taking it slowly. You know, watching videos on YouTube about the imagery, but I mean, one card can have an hour-long video on just the imagery and the symbolism in one card. So it's definitely a deck that I'm sipping on. I'm not diving in fully, and I'm just taking my time with it and enjoying the process. Because at the end of the day, tarot is supposed to be fun. And I was making it not fun for myself, and that's why I got overwhelmed. But you just gotta have fun with it. And so this is the deck that I'm sure I could use it for pathworking if I did ever decide to do that. Because again, it serves a multitude of purposes. But for now, it is a study deck, and I'm taking my time with it and enjoying the process. So this is the Thoth. This is the US Games large version, and I have trimmed all the borders, and now it is the perfect size, and it really frees up Lady Frida Harris's beautiful, beautiful artwork. So that is my study deck, and it is staying on my reading table, never far from reach, and I'm really enjoying the process of studying this deck. Okay, the fourth prompt is a deck for personal growth. And this one was a little tricky, again, because I use a lot of my decks for a lot of different reasons, but after some thought, I did realize that there was one deck that I did use for personal growth more than other decks in my library. And that is my Mermaid Tarot by Lisa Robertson, art by Julie Dillon. And for personal growth, I took that to mean sort of seeing the areas where I can grow and really shining a light on what I need to do. Because this deck does not hold back, it is not afraid to pull punches, but the artwork is still very watery, and I feel very comforted by the element of water in general. So it gives me space to feel safe and still tell me, hey, this is what's going on. This is what, you know, you're doing. This is the situation. Here's what you can do. And it's definitely a deck I use more in the summertime, and I did get it towards the end of the summer last year, so it hasn't gotten a lot of use, but with summer right around the corner, I do think it is going to be out on my altar a lot more than it has been in the past. And the Llewellyn cardstock is just amazing. It's some of my favorite. It's one of the only decks that I can comfortably riffle shuffle. A lot of the other decks I have to shuffle hand over hand. So that also helps with the process too. If I'm more comfortable shuffling a deck, I'm more likely to use it. And it just, a lot of people call it like a Disney deck, but I don't really see it that way. Like, yes, the art could lean that way, but I think there's so much more depth to this deck than people give credit for. And there's diversity, like this Lover's card is very androgynous to me, which I love. And there's just like a new take on a lot of the cards, and we still do get the elemental energy within each suit. So it's not simply a water deck, it's water, but also within all the separate elements as well. And it just feels very comforting, and it's kind of like the older sister that is going to tell you what you need to hear, but then give you a big hug afterwards, if that makes sense. And it's a deck that I just really enjoy, and there's a lot of cards that are just fun. So this is one that I do reach for a lot when I'm working on personal growth. And I feel like personal growth can kind of go hand in hand with shadow work and inner child work, just because like you're getting to the root of tough stuff and trying to overcome that. So this can work for a multitude of sorts of readings that I do. But if we're talking specifically about personal growth at the spot I am in my life now, then this is definitely one that I do reach for. So this is The Mermaid Tarot by Lisa Robertson, art by Julie Dillon. And here are the backs, and I have edged this myself in a Crayola teal marker. Okay. Ooh, okay. Sorry, I'm reading the next prompt and I'm getting excited. Okie doke. Put mermaid away. Okay, so the next prompt is a deck that is your ride or die. And if you've been on my channel for more than 2 seconds, you already know what deck this is going to be. It is my Ethereal Visions. And this is one of those decks that I can't explain why it works so well for me. It's probably something to do with it being the first deck I got. It's one of the 2 that I learned tarot with. But this is one that I don't ever picture getting rid of. It's one that it's just always going to be near me. And it does serve a multitude of readings for me. Like any of the readings that I just talked about, this deck can do. Or the Thoth can do, or any of the decks really can do. But I think it's interesting to think about what sort of readings you use a deck more for. Use the deck for more. So it was interesting to kind of go through all the prompts and think about what I use. But Ethereal is just, it's my heart and soul in a deck, and it just is so clear to me. Sorry, they're cutting the grass next door, so I apologize if you can hear that. Hopefully it's not too loud. But this deck is just a staple in my collection. A lot of people, when they think of me reading tarot, this is the deck they think of. And it's just, it's my ride or die. No other way to spell it out. It's just beautiful and traditional, but it has that Art Nouveau spin on the RWS, and I love it. So this was my Ride or Die deck. This is the Ethereal Visions Tarot by Matt Hughes. Okay. So the last 2 prompts are a little bit different, whereas the first 5 are more kinds of reading that one may do. The last 2 are a little bit different. And the first of those 2 is Hello There, or a new deck in your collection or library that you are in the process of getting to know. And for me, that's actually an oracle, and it is the Illustrated Bestiary Oracle deck. This is the newest deck in my collection. Still getting to know it, but so far I love this deck. After getting the Northern Animal Tarot, I did want to sort of venture into more animal energy, and I was looking for an animal oracle. I'm so sorry, they're so loud outside. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're gonna power through. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think they're done cutting the grass on this side of the building. So we shall continue. This is the Illustrated Bestiary Oracle by Mia Toll. And she also has 2 other decks with a similar theme. One is herbs and the other is crystals. And the backs are all the same, so you can really mix and match, intermingle as many cards or decks as you want, which I think is really cool. I'm definitely open to adding the herb and crystal one to this, but the reason I got this one in particular is because I wanted more animal energy after receiving the Northern Animal Tarot deck. And there were not a ton out there that I loved. And I know this about myself, I am very picky when it comes to getting to the point to purchase a deck. So it has to check a lot of boxes, and I'm one of those people that if even one card like rubs me the wrong way, I won't get a deck. Which is good for my wallet. And I just find that I do like to have a more curated tarot library in general. So it really helps me just make sure that I'm bringing in decks that I know I'm going to love and know I'm going to use. This one in particular, there were a multitude of cards that sold me on the deck. This one being one of them. I think that having a human card in an animal oracle deck, oracle deck, is just amazing, and you really don't see it that much. And the guidebook blurb for this card is just amazing. After I work with this deck a little bit more, I do want to sort of do a review for it. I also like that this deck has animals that you don't always see in animal decks, like Eastern Oyster. I think there's like a skunk, and well, there is a skunk, but like spiders, like animals that aren't necessarily, you know, charismatic megafauna, as we say. And I think it's important to have a variety of animals in an animal deck, because there's a variety of animals in the animal kingdom. But this is a deck that I'm still getting to know, and I have been loving it so far. What I like to do with my oracles in general right now is I will ask the oracle deck for a message for the day, and then I'll read the guidebook for that card. And depending on the wording of the blurb in the guidebook, that will help me create the questions for my tarot deck that day. And I do want to sort of make a video on how I do that. So hopefully I can do that soon. So keep your eyes out for that. Yeah, here's the little skunk I was talking about. So stinking cute. Literally. And like Tabby Cat. Like there's so many cards in this deck that you just don't really see in other animal decks. And that's what really sold me. And I'm also very picky with my oracle decks because I like having the keyword and then a key phrase. And I do not like numbers on my oracle decks, just because I feel like in an oracle they don't really need numbers unless it is sort of like a chronological, or like unless there's a meaning for the numbers, I don't see why oracles need numbers, but that's just me. River Otter is another card that sold me on the deck. I love river otters. Oh, these remind me of the 2 otters that I got to work with at my first job. So, just makes me happy, and I love the artwork. So yeah, so this is a deck I'm still getting to know. So this is the Hello There deck, and it is the Illustrated Bestiary Oracle by Mia Toll. Okay, last prompt for hashtag my workhorse decks, and that is hello again. And I did already cover this deck, so I'm just going to bring it out and kind of touch on this really briefly. But it is the Thoth Tarot. So this is one that, like I mentioned before, I had it, didn't work with it for months, and I'm just starting to work with it again. So this is one that I came really close to actually getting rid of because I was so intimidated by all the layers to this deck, and I just felt like, in my mind, I thought I will never get to a point where I know all of it. And that's probably still true, but it's not going to stop me from using it now. This is a deck that I could have for a lifetime and probably never learn everything, because there's so much depth and richness to it that it's really going to take a lot of study on my end, and that's exciting for me. So this is my hello again because I got it, did not use it, and I'm now at a place where I can finally say that I'm ready to work with it again. So this is the Hello Again deck. And again, it is the Thoth by US Games, large version, trimmed of its borders. So that is my VR to Simon over at the Hermit's Cave, hashtag my workhorse decks. Thank you guys for joining me today. And on your way out, please give the video a like, consider subscribing, and if you do subscribe, please ring the bell so you get notified when I upload new content. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and before you go, please remember, you matter, you are loved, and you can make a difference. Bye everyone.